Books to Prisoners. I will say that the organization is essentially a collective organization. So although I have this fancy title of president, it actually means very little, and I am accorded no special privilege in the organization by being president. All I get to do is various things like I sort the letters, and I deal with a lot of the external relations and stuff like that. So I'm not special in the organization. So quick introduction to Books to Prisoners. We are a 501c3 non-profit organization that has been in existence somewhere close to 50 years. We're not entirely sure when we started. There's conflicting descriptions about when we started. It was either in 1973 or 1979, depending on who you believe. But basically, we've been sending books to prisoners across the United States at no charge to them since then. We got started essentially as a political prisoner support group. This was, of course, in the time of the 1970s when all kinds of things were happening. Since then, we've very much broadened out our perspective on things, and our mission is basically surrounding the idea of the importance of books as part of literacy, obviously, self-education and self-empowerment, particularly to folks who have, sort of either not been educated, had terrible education, or have been miseducated in many ways and not learnt about some of the important things or things that would be important to them, both in terms of race and ethnic stuff, but also just general education and life skills often. We're a volunteer-driven non-profit organization, and we had been all volunteer all through our existence until 2013. When we came into sufficient funds, one-time funds, to pay a part-time staffer. So we have right now a 15 hours per week staffer program coordinator, and that's but basically all the organization, all the backroom stuff is done by volunteers, including myself. We receive something in the order of about 1,000 requests a month. That is a COVID level. Pre-COVID, we were getting about 1,200 letters. Sorry, did I say a week? I meant a month. A month. About 1,200 letters a month from folks. We're not quite sure why the number has gone down. It could be a number of different factors that are. You can ask me about them if that's desperately important to you. So what that equates to is in 2021, we sent out about 9.5 tons of books. The most popular categories are dictionaries, how to draw books, Black studies, vocational studies, and genre fictions. And you can imagine that genre fictions like sci-fi and fantasy are really quite popular, escapist literature, to get people out of these little boxes and situations that they are in. A couple of other side things that we do other than sending books is, of course, that we raise the profile of the issue of prison issues to folks around the country, and that's kind of important. So, for instance, we work with a lot of youth groups. We've had a relationship with City of Mercer Island for years and years and years, and they send their youth groups to us every summer and have done for a couple of decades now. And one of the other things that we do is, of course, we have to be something of an advocacy and or fighting organization because of the amount of restrictions that we come up against from prison systems that decide that reading is not a priority for the folks who are incarcerated in their prisons. And just to give you a quick example, in 2019, our own state the state that we're in, I should say, Seattle. We're in the city of Seattle in the state of Washington. It decided to ban used books from organizations such as Books to Prisoners, and so we had to sort of like mobilize for a fight against the Department of Corrections in our own state to say this is unacceptable and these are the reasons why it's unacceptable, and can you explain why you're doing this, which they couldn't. And eventually, after a big grassroots mobilization and words from the governor and a very timely freedom of information request from the Seattle Times, the Department of Corrections backed down completely. So that's good. So the question I often get is, why do we do this? Well, I mean, one of the reasons why we send to individuals specifically is that it creates a human connection to the folks who are incarcerated. And a lot of these folks are very disengaged from family and friends. They are sometimes being disowned. So, you know, getting this personal connection can be very, very important. And to really remind people that they're not out there just them, they're part of us. So I mean, that's the personal connection that we think is important. The second is that, you know, if prison libraries were effective, there wouldn't really be a need for us, but they aren't. They're underfunded, or access to them is very limited. You know, you can imagine if you're trying to improve your vocabulary and improve your ability to write and understand, that having a dictionary so that you can understand all these words that you don't understand and only have access to it maybe for half an hour a week is not going to be enough. And a lot of places will not supply educational materials of this nature to people. So we send them to those folks who can receive them. So the question is, yeah, are we really needed? Yes, we are, because the libraries are insufficient. And how do we know this? Well, because people actually tell us this. We get lots of letters. We've had some, I mean, not lots of letters, we get a few letters. And some of them have been really moving about, you know, from people who have actually gotten out and told us how important it was, you know, making a change in their life, that sort of like, so oftentimes they hadn't really considered reading, you know, before, and they hadn't realized how much it could open their eyes to other possibilities. So you know, we understand that when people get out, they have other priorities. So it's always fantastic to get those letters to tell us, you know, what a difference it makes. I don't know if I've probably run over my 5 minutes. I will stop and we can do Q&A if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Andy. I know I have at least one myself. If we have any members of the congregation who have a question, please come forward to the mic and ask. I'll give it a couple minutes for that.
May I ask a question?
All right. Well, we have somebody on the floor. We'll get to them.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Karen next, and then first the person on the floor. Just introduce yourself and ask your question.
Sure. My name is Willa Tabor. I'm a member of the vestry, but I happen to have a sister who's in prison in New York State, and she can only receive books that are mailed from a publisher. So how do inmates learn about your organization? And do you send directly just to the prisons themselves the books, or do individual prisoners, are they able to receive books?
Okay, multi-part question. If I forget part of the question, just jog my memory. How do people hear about us? Largely, it's been word of mouth. We historically have usually been running at capacity. At various points in time, we've been terribly, 6 months or more behind in answering requests. We've honed our skills a little bit. And managed to catch up. COVID threw us a little bit for a loop, but we never fell back behind more than about 3 months behind in answering requests. But as you can imagine, what that means is that we're rarely short of people requesting. So we, for a while, were not advertising in any of the prisoner resource lists that there are out there. If people would ask us, hey, do you want to be on this resource list? We'd say, no, thank you. But we're at a point now where we can expand yet again. And so there are prisoner resource lists which individuals and organizations send out, but largely it is word of mouth. And do we send? Yes, we send directly to individual prisoners. And what that means is, of course, that we cannot get into all states and we cannot get into all prisons. Some states specifically ban non-profit providers, distributors of books. Some only allow a specific 1 or 2 book vendors, like they only allow Barnes and Noble or Edward Hamilton. And some have some very tight restrictions on what can be sent. So for instance, there's quite a few states which only allow new books. And because most of our books are donated and they're donated used, we can't send anything into those prisons because we don't have anything to send. Limitations on the content. Some states have restrictions lists of the actual titles. Now, I don't know how they determined that certain books are not allowed, but you know, oftentimes they're ones which might you know, provide, on the one hand, education, and on the other hand, annoyance at the systemic problems that someone is facing. So the new Jim Crow has been banned from many prisons, and books on Malcolm X have been banned from many prisons. But I mean, some incredibly innocuous books have also been banned just because somebody at some point in time read something and they thought, I don't like that, that shouldn't get in. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Karen with her question on Zoom.
Yes. Do you interface with teachers in the prisons at all?
We don't have almost any contact with teachers. Usually the contact that we have from them is them requesting books, and unfortunately we don't have great access. You know, there's some things that we find easy to get and some things which are really difficult. I mean, on our website, which is fairly easily Googleable, www.books2prisoners.net, we have a page which says these are the subjects that we really want to get. So you know, sort of, and that is books that we find it difficult to find. But oftentimes, of course, teachers are looking for you know, a set of books, and you know, we don't get donated like big sets which would work for classrooms. Mostly the contact that we get is prison librarians, and that can be both, you know, paid librarians and prisoners working as librarians, and they will make requests. Again, that's not our priority. We want to make that personal connection, but we do send to prison with certain caveats.
Thank you for your question, Karen. I have a question of my own. So because most of your books you mentioned are donations, what impact do monetary donations have on the organization?
Well, a great impact. I mean, we send everything out through USPS. So even though we pay rent, even though we have a part-time program coordinator, our largest annual expense is postage. I think, if I remember rightly, it's more than 50% of our expenditure each year. Yeah, it's pretty weighty. I think I've forgotten the question now. What was it?
Oh, basically what donations are used for.
Yeah. So I mean, so postage is very much the largest one. Our rent is currently, I think, the second largest expense that we have, and the third is the part-time program coordinator. Again, it's being volunteer driven. All the people who do all the behind the scenes stuff do not get compensated for anything they do, and we only very rarely spend money on books because we've never really had a budget for it. There's a family foundation which has been helping out every now and then. What they've been doing is allowing doing special promotions with our partner bookshops, so that sometimes now we have a small side budget for actually buying specific books which might be really important to someone's education, or really important, you know, in developing their knowledge of their situation. So we very occasionally spend money on books, but that is a tiny fraction of our expenditure.
All right, thank you, Andy. We'll go back to the floor. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Oh, hi, I'm Jocelyn Tidwell. I actually used to live in Seattle, so it's great work that you're doing. I know the King County prison system, and I know some of the restrictions that they have. So great work on you guys, like navigating all those different regulations, which sometimes seem incredibly arbitrary. So I just want to say, so many people must be grateful, and you probably don't hear it enough. So thank you for your work. I also wondered if there's any state or national legislation or any kind of policy work that maybe we could join you on or get the word out about. If there's any kind of policy work that you guys are doing that we could help advocate for.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn. Well, as I said, I guess most of the time, the situation is the unfortunate one that I find myself at, you know, like in my paid job as well. It's usually a matter of putting out fires when they burst out. So when a prison decides to put in a new draconian restriction or ban on books, we try to react to it, and of course we're doing this ongoing work, you know, day in, day out, every month. So it becomes difficult to focus on the longer term proactive kind of stance on things. In 2019, the coalition of prison book programs, because I mean there's a number of programs across the country, some of them large and venerable, like Books to Prisoners, and some of them startups with just 1 or 2 people doing things in a small rural town somewhere in Idaho. We got together in Boston, and you know, it was clear that just putting out fires always means that we again are only reactive, and it means that we are you know, unable, we're not putting our message out there about the importance of reading and literacy for all kinds of different reasons, including, I mean, you know, even for folks who are very conservative. I mean, there are great arguments for why people should be allowed to read and receive a decent education in prison, and that reason is to prevent recidivism. You know, with so many people, I mean, 95% of the folks in prison will eventually get out. And how do you want them to be? Do you want them to be better people? Do you want them to be worse people? Well, if you want them to be better people, give them the tools to be better people. That was a slight digression. To get back to the point, so at Boston in 2019, we talked about creating a national organization which wouldn't control the individual prison book programs, but might provide a means of a more a proactive approach to dealing with these issues. And so that's really, I mean, it's still, you know, still in the formative stages, really. I mean, apart from anything else, there isn't yet the funding to make it a solid thing, but there's also deciding what the focus should be. So, but I think that's our best, greatest hope for something, because when things have come up, like for instance, at the beginning of this year, there was a bit of a hubbub because of something that we tweeted on about a Malcolm X book that was rejected by a Tennessee prison, and I mean, sort of it created a lot of interest, but I mean, again, we weren't able to capitalize on that because, you know, again, it was, the situation was really quite reactive. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. Do we have any more questions on the floor?
Yep.
Just come up, introduce yourself, and then ask your question, please.
Hi, my name is Pat Alexander, and so you take donated books. Do you prefer hardbacks, paperbacks, new or used, or all of them?
Hey, Pat. If people donate new books, that's fantastic because, as I said, we have very, very few new books, and so you know, it's when somebody from a prison which only allows new books or good condition books writes to us, we have to send them something that they didn't want, and an apology to say, hey, I'm sorry, we didn't have anything close. We didn't have anything even close to what you wanted. Here's something else just to read. A lot of prisons will also not allow hardback books in. The prisons consider them to be, or many prisons consider them to be a greater security risk for contraband or whatever. So we have a strong preference for paperbacks. Now we understand that not all books always get published in paperback. So, you know, particularly highly requested stuff, you know, how to draw books and things like that, we'll take them, and we'll be able to send them to some prisons which do allow them. But yeah, used is good as long as it's not marked up or torn or anything else like that. Again, and any water damage is also seen as a no-no by pretty much all prisons. But yeah, strong preference for paperbacks.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions on the floor? If not, I have one more question I would like to ask, but I'll give everybody a minute or two. All right, if there are no more questions, I have one more question I would like to ask to close this out, unless anybody else thinks of any others. So if a person wants to get more involved with the Books to Prisoners initiative besides monetary donations, what can they do?
I will have to look up and see. I don't know that there is any group that is particularly close to you. So that I was going to say, well, just, you know, if you're in a place where it has a prison book program, go and help them out, because most programs need some help. But I don't, as far as to the best of my knowledge, there isn't one close to you. I'll do another research on that and double check. But I think, I mean, yes, donating cash is really helpful. As I said, I mean, sort of we run on donations, and we run on primarily on individual donations. We very rarely get any kind of organization granting us funds, and we certainly have never been successful writing grants. So usually if we do get a grant from a small family foundation, it's unsolicited. But yeah, gathering books is a really helpful one. I would, if you know, for people who are looking at getting us or other organizations books, I do encourage you to check out our website or the website of any other organization that you choose to see what is needed. Because one thing that is not helpful, I would say, is when somebody decides to just you know, if their grandparent or something passes away, and that person had a huge library, and so I think I'll just box it up and just give it to Books for Prisoners. They need books, which is lovely, the thought, but is really quite unhelpful, because oftentimes it's a bunch of damaged hardbacks or thousands and thousands of romance novels which really don't get requested very frequently, and we end up having to recycle or give to a thrift store, you know, thousands and thousands of books, and that takes up our time. So I would caution to be you know, in contact with the organization that you are potentially helping, to make sure that what you're doing is a help. But I think, I mean, for people who are across the country, you know, making an effort to find books that are needed is a really helpful thing, because that, again, that's the kind of thing that means that we don't have to be running around trying to find books if someone is doing it for us. And we've been very lucky, you know, in the past with that, but we can always use certain specific genres and subjects that if you could find them for us. So that's I think that's the main sort of thing.
And can you remind us one more time what the most popular requested categories are?
Yeah, so I mean the top number one is dictionaries. So again, paperback dictionaries are always welcome. We can never have too many of those. How to draw books. I will stress how to draw books which don't contain nudity. Even cartoon nudity is not allowable in most prisons, so we can't send it in. Certain kinds of vocational books, carpentry, plumbing, auto mechanics. Again, if we can get it in paperback, that is best. And I'm going to say this is a really difficult one. Books on re-entry. They're obviously not something which is just hanging out in a thrift store. They're something that you have to buy. But books which basically tell people how to manage the transition from prison to life on the outside is something we never ever have enough of. And what else? I guess I wouldn't worry too much about genre fictions, except maybe fantasy and horror. We've got a fairly good supplier of those at the moment.
Okay, that is very good information. Thank you. We do have at least one more question on the floor. Go ahead.
My name is Margaret McHale, and I'm just curious, roughly the percentage of male prisoners and female prisoners that you serve?
Yeah, it for years and years and years, it always was about 5% of requests came from women. That number, or that percentage has gone up. It's not gone up a huge amount, but it's gone up and seems to be heading up. The most recent number is like 8%. I think 8% of requests are from women. Why is that? I'm not sure. I don't think the prison population of women in terms of percentage has gone up. Again, it could be one of those things where sort of like word of mouth has improved. But yeah, I mean, I think it's about right.
And I'm also curious, do the topics vary? The topics of request or interest, is there any significant difference in the kinds of books that women would ask for as opposed to?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Yes, I mean, sort of obviously both with men and women, there's a wide of subjects that they are interested in and request. But yes, I mean, one of the ways that we actually do move romance off our shelves is that we do get a fair number of, I mean, of that 7 to 8% of requests are romance. And I don't know where you stand on these matters, but we are always a little disappointed that our shelves of women's studies is bulging because it so rarely gets requested.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. We'll give everybody maybe another minute to come forth if they have any other questions. Otherwise, I'd very much like to thank Andy Chan for joining us here today. This has been a very great educational experience, learning how the organization works, what donations go towards, and what other kinds of donations you accept, and most importantly, the impact that you have on prisoners that are currently in the system. I don't know if you have any like personal testimonials from anyone or any stories that really stuck out to you, if that would be allowed to be shared.
Yeah, sure. We actually, I mean, sort of, some of them have been so moving over the years that eventually we thought, how can we capture this? So we actually did publish a book that is available from us called Dear Books to Prisoners, and it's, you know, I think it's a fantastic book, of course, and it basically has a bunch of letters, you know, from folks on the inside explaining what a difference reading makes, and what Books for Prisoners has done for them specifically. Now, when we published that, I think in 2019, we had to gather new letters from people, because we, you know, although we had some great letters over the years, that we didn't have permission to publish them. So we got, basically, we, you know, people who had written to us, we said, hey, if you wanted to say something, and we have permission from you to put that in the book? And so we did. But one that we were not willing to publish, it was an old one, and it always got me, because this person was on death row, and he wrote us a letter to say how important, you know, getting books from us had been over the years for him, and that he just wanted to write because he was going to be executed in about 2 weeks. So and it always gets me thinking about that one.
And if somebody wanted to purchase a book, where could they get it? I see you have a local bookstore that you work with, but is there any way to get these online?
Yeah, you'd have to email us at booksprisoners@live.com, or go to the website. It's I think you send the link, and there's a tab which I think it says merchandise or merch, and we have Books for Prisoners t-shirts there, and also this book, and it's a great coffee table book, and makes a great present, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy Chan. This has been a terrific experience, and with that, can we give our presenter a round of applause?
Thank you so much to Christine and the congregation there at St. George's. It's been a great experience meeting some of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and we hope to work with your organization again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody in the sanctuary and on Zoom who joined us today. This has been a great experience, and we will be doing more of these with other organizations that we donate our time and our resources to. So we will have another one of these in the future. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.